Hello everyone. Today we're jumping straight into the wild world of frogs. Hope you're ready. We're exploring the European common frog, Rana temporaria, and how female frogs use clever behaviors to tell unwanted males, nope, not today. In springtime, frogs gather at ponds to find a mate for breeding season. When the males spot a female, they spring into action. But the problem is that there are usually way more males than females. This can make the female feel jumpy. This is known as explosive breeding, when several males rush toward the female at once, trying to grab onto her. It's what researchers call a mating ball, and that can be really dangerous for the females, who experience a lot of stress, and some even die from drowning under the weight. In spring 2019, scientists Carolyn Dietrich and Mark Oliver Rödel from the Museum of Natural History Berlin and the University of Jyväskylä in Finland filmed European common frogs during the breeding season. Their goal was to study male mating preferences, specifically whether males favored larger or smaller females. To find out, they watched 54 frog dates in action. They put one male frog with two female frogs in a water tank and recorded what happened using cameras. The initial findings suggested that males showed no strong preference based on size. When the researchers reviewed the video recordings, they noticed something surprising. The females weren't just sitting there waiting to be chosen, they were actively doing things when the males approached them. This was a big deal because for a long time researchers had thought females were passive participants in the mating process, never the chooser, just the chosen. So this discovery made the researchers pause and rethink. And in 2023, they came back to those same recordings, but with a new question in mind. What role do female frogs play in the mating process? The researchers identified three key behaviors that female frogs use to avoid unwanted mating attempts. These are known as avoidance behaviors. If a female frog wants to be left alone, she might turn away from the male, or she might let out a squeak or a grunt. And when things get intense, she might go all out with a clever tactic called tonic immobility. Basically, she plays dead to get some peace and quiet. To make sense of all of this, they ran statistical tests using a computer program called R. They compared how often these behaviors happened in relation to body size, and they ran numbers to estimate how likely females were to try to escape a male's attempt, depending on whether the female was larger or smaller than him. By testing many behaviors and adjusting for chance findings, they could be confident that their results were real patterns and not random noise. The researchers found that among all her defensive moves, rotation is the most popular, but pairing it with a good grunt or a squeak really drives the point home. 48% of females would agree. And if all else fails, just go full possum. Playing dead works wonders when they really won't take the hint. The most successful females were the ones who used all three of these behaviors. Interestingly, smaller females were more successful at escaping than larger ones, possibly because they were harder for the males to hold on to, and you can see this in the diagrams. the likelihood of a female frog escaping decreased as the size of the female increased. All of their code, data, and graphs were shared openly online, showing a clear commitment to transparency and reproducibility, which is a great example of how modern science should be done. So why does this matter? Because it shows that female frogs aren't just sitting there doing nothing, they're actively trying to protect themselves. These moves might help them survive, especially for smaller females who use all the moves together. It also changes how we think about frogs, because now we know that they are in fact active participants in the mating process. This study was just the beginning. Now scientists want to know more, like, does stress make frogs freeze more? And what happens if the pond is even more crowded with male frogs? And do older frogs act differently than younger ones? Understanding these things can even help us protect frogs in the wild. Even though the study gave us some amazing new insights into how female frogs avoid unwanted mating, it did have a few limitations. For one, the research was done in a lab and not in the wild, and only for 1 hour. While the setup made it easier to see and record everything clearly, it doesn't perfectly show what happens in a real pond, where there's more space, changing temperatures, and many more frogs. There were also only 54 females included in the study, all from one population. Because of that, we can't be completely sure that all common frogs behave the same way. Females in other places or climates might act differently. Lastly, the study only looked at what the frogs did, not what was happening inside their bodies or their prior experience. So next time you see a frog, remember these important lessons we can learn from them. Firstly, size does matter, but smaller may be better. Secondly, sometimes it's best to avoid the crowds. And lastly, if you ever feel pressured, just make a loud noise. And if that doesn't work, play dead.